Cool, let's do this. Hi Vinay Nayak, hi Dhruv Kadam, कैसे हो भाई लोग? It's good to see you here. आज actually मैं मेरे घर पे नहीं हूँ, हम थोड़ा सा बाहर आए हुए थे and it's my parents' anniversary. So like तो इसलिए आपको लोकेशन थोड़ा सा different दिख रहा होगा. But now I want to talk about my यहाँ से लाइट बेटर आ रही है ना? हाँ, इसको और पास लाते हैं. Now I want to talk about my favorite commencement speeches. मेरे को बहुत शौक है commencement speeches देखने का and हम देखने वाले हैं. आप लोगों ने स्टीव जॉब्स की जैसे commencement speech देखी होगी where I think he went to Harvard. Hi Prastav, hi Abhinav, hi Mukul. आप लोग बताओ आपकी कौन सी favorite commencement speech है? मैं आप लोगों को मेरी दिखाता हूँ. One of my favorites, let me quickly share the screen with you guys. Guys, audio clear आ रहा है ना? Let me know if the audio is clear. ठीक है? So I'll share my screen with you guys. Google, Chrome. Yes, so we are going to watch my favorite commencement speeches. And मैं आप लोगों को पहली स्पीच दिखाना चाहता हूँ. Let me share the screen again. It's a speech by Mr. Neil Gaiman. मैं उन्हें Neil Gaiman बुलाता हूँ. I don't know how you guys pronounce it. Neil Gaiman speech. This is one of my all-time favorite speeches. And हम थोड़ी सी ये देखेंगे. उसके बाद मैं और आपको जल्दी और recommend करूँगा.
Thank you. I never really expected to find myself giving advice to people graduating from an establishment of higher education. I never graduated from any such establishment.
Guys, आवाज clear आ रही है ना?
I never even started at one. I escaped from school as soon as I could, when the prospect of 4 more years of enforced learning before I could become the writer I wanted to be seemed stifling. I got out into the world, I wrote, and I became a better writer the more I wrote, and I wrote some more, and nobody ever seemed to mind that I was making it all up as I went along. They just read what I wrote and they paid me for it, or they didn't. And often they commissioned me to write something else for them, which has left me with a healthy respect and fondness for higher education that those of my friends and family who attended universities were cured of long ago. Looking back, I've had a remarkable ride. I'm not sure I can call it a career.
So if you're an artist or if you're an aspiring artist, I think इससे better क्योंकि इन्होंने University of Arts में speech दी थी. This is that is the reason. अगर if you aspire to make career in arts, इससे better आपको advice नहीं मिलेगा ना कि मेरी ये कैसे mood uplifting वाली playlist भी है तो ये है उसमें कि हाँ mood कभी खराब हो तो ये देख लो. Oh, by the way, guys, just off like totally unrelated. 10 minutes back, Chalchitra Talks crossed 20,000 subscribers. So you guys can like tell us like congrats and all. हाँ, notes बनाने के लिए कहना Manish Patil, so I will make notes. Good.
Yeah. Because a career implies that I had some kind of career plan, and I never did. The nearest thing I had was a list I made when I was about 15 of everything I wanted to do. I wanted to write an adult novel, a children's book, a comic, a movie, record an audio book, write an episode of Doctor Who, and so on. I didn't have a career, I just did the next thing on the list. So I thought I'd tell you everything I wish I'd known starting out, and a few things that looking back on it, I suppose I did know, and that I'd also give you the best piece of advice I'd ever got, which I completely failed to follow. First of all, when you start out on a career in the arts, you have no idea what you're doing. This is great. People who know what they're doing know the rules, and they know what is possible and what is impossible. You do not, and you should not. The rules on what is possible and impossible in the arts were made by people who had not tested the bounds of the possible by going beyond them. And you can. If you don't know it's impossible, it's easier to do. And because nobody's done it before, they haven't made up rules to stop anyone doing that particular thing again. Secondly, if you have an idea of what you want to make, what you were put here to do, then just go and do that. And that's much harder than it sounds, and sometimes in the end so much easier than you might imagine. Because normally there are things you have to do before you can get to the place you want to be. I wanted to write comics and novels and stories and films. So I became a journalist, because journalists are allowed to ask questions and to simply...
I hope you guys know about Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman, I think last year Jaipur Literature Fest भी आने वाला था. हर साल like ऐसे rumor होता है, but I think he was about to come. नील गेमन ने काफ़ी सारी किताबें लिखी हैं. इनकी एक किताब है स्टारडस्ट करके, एंड बच्चों की किताबें लिखते हैं ये. काफ़ी कुछ है. तो जैसे उन्होंने लिखी अमेरिकन गॉड्स, विच इज स्टारडस्ट इज देयर, गुड ओमेन्स इज देयर. इस पे अभी अमेजॉन प्राइम का जिस पे एक शो भी बना है, American Gods is there. एक बच्चों की The Graveyard Book. I have read this, which is very, very good. So he's considered one of the best fiction writers of all time, and he's pretty solid. So like if you haven't read any of इनकी किताबें, you should start with maybe The Graveyard Book, because I can vouch for it because I've read it. There is this another book by him, How to Talk to Girls at Parties. नाम से मैं भी नाम सोच के मैंने सोचा अरे बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग होगी, पढ़ी. बट ये बहुत weird kind की story है. It is nothing about how to talk to girls at parties. But I love the name of this book. So ये जो fictional creatures लाते हैं, like it's very amazing. तो अब वापस देखते हैं.
Go and find out how the world works. And besides, to do those things, I needed to write, and to write well. And I was being paid to learn how to write economically, crisply, sometimes under adverse conditions, and on deadline. Sometimes the way to do what you hope to do will be clear-cut, and sometimes it'll be almost impossible to decide whether or not you're doing the correct thing, because you'll have to balance your goals and hopes with feeding yourself, paying debts, finding work, settling for what you can get. Something that worked for me was imagining that where I wanted to be, which was an author, primarily of fiction, making good books, making good comics, making good drama, and supporting myself through my words. Imagining that was a mountain, a distant mountain, my goal. And I knew that as long as I kept walking towards the mountain, I'd be all right. And when I truly was not sure what to do, I could stop and think about whether it was taking me towards or away from the mountain. I said no to editorial jobs on magazines.
मैं अब थोड़ा सा आगे करके दिखाता हूँ क्योंकि इसमें बहुत कुछ है. जैसे एक पार्ट आता है
health and in all the other ways that life can go wrong. And when things get tough, this is what you should do.
Oh fuck, like मैंने बिल्कुल सही मोमेंट पे लगाया guys. When things get tough, this is what you should do. ये मतलब अब coincidence था कि जो मैं पार्ट दिखाना चाहता था वही पार्ट आ गया. Again, he's taking it from here. When things get tough, this is what you should do.
Make good art. I'm serious. Husband runs off with a politician, make good art. Leg crushed and then eaten by a mutated boa constrictor, make good art. IRS on your trail, make good art. Cat exploded, make good art. Someone on the internet thinks what you're doing is stupid or evil or it's all been done before, make good art. Probably things will work out somehow, and eventually time will take the sting away. And that doesn't even matter. Do what only you can do best. Make good art. Make it on the bad days.
Make it on
the good days too.
Fuck.
And fifthly, while you're at it, make your art. Do the stuff that only you can do.
So अगली जो अभी लाइन बोलेंगे इसका पोस्टर लगा हुआ है मेरे बॉम्बे में रूम में. Do the stuff only you can do. So उसको elaborate करके बताएंगे. It's very, very beautiful.
The urge starting out is to copy, and that's not a bad thing. Most of us only find our own voices after we've sounded like a lot of other people. But the one thing that you have that nobody else has is you. Your voice, your mind, your story, your vision. So write and draw and build and play and dance and live as only you can. The moment that you feel that just possibly you're walking down the street naked, exposing too much of your heart and your mind and what exists on the inside, showing too much of yourself, that's the moment you may be starting to get it right. The things I've done that worked the best were the things I was the least certain about. The stories where I was sure they'd either work or more likely be the kind of embarrassing failures that people would gather together and discuss until the end of time. They always have that in common. Looking back,
इसके बाद एक इसमें सजेशन देते हैं how to deal with clients, which is very very good. वो पार्ट भी मेरे को ढूंढना पड़ेगा कि काफी cool पार्ट है वो.
and because they're easy to, and because they deliver the work on time.
Okay, so again, coincidence, I clicked at the exact point which I wanted to show to you guys. अपने साथ है आज भगवान.
Challenged. But you get work however you get work. But people keep working in a freelance world. And more of today's world is freelance. Because their work is good. And because they're easy to get along with. And because they deliver the work on time. And you don't even need all three.
This.
2 out of 3 is fine.
Let's listen to this part again because this is the most important point.
Work on time. Work is good. And more of today's world is freelance. Because their work is good. And because they're easy to get along with.
So the points are your work is good. You are easy to get along with. Which was the third one?
And because they deliver the work on time.
You do the work on time. Now the point is you don't need all three of these things. इनमें से किसी भी दो का तुम permutation combination लगा लो, it will work. Now he will explain this.
And you don't even need all 3. 2 out of 3 is fine. People will tolerate how unpleasant you are if your work is good and you deliver it on time. People will forgive the lateness of your work if it's good and they like you. And you don't have to be as good as everyone else if you're on time, and it's always a pleasure to hear from you.
This was the point I wanted to show you. We can move to the next one now. So, लोग बता रहे हैं वो साचा बैरन की वो वाली देखते हैं, लेकिन साचा बैरन speech. This is recommended by Jovin TV. Is this the one? हाँ ये वाली हार्वर्ड वाली. वही मैंने थोड़ी सी देखी हुई है. या मैंने पूरी देखी हुई है, स्टार्टिंग से चलाता है.
I am John Paul Fox, a class marshal from Mather House.
And I'm Zach Corker, also a class marshal from...
Is now.
Ali G.
Booyakasha! Professor G in the house, alright? Big shout going out to the Harvard Massive. I has done a capital H because Harvard is a place, innit? You see, I ain't no ignoramus. Things like apple and orange don't start with a capital letter unless they is the start of a sentence. But some of you brain boxes probably know that already, innit? My name be Ali G and me represent the UK. UK. Wherever. For those of you who didn't study geography, the UK is a place over 100 miles away from here. The capital of it is, anyone? No, not you, Geography Square. Yes, it's Liverpool. Clever and quite fly, if you don't mind me saying. First of all, I've got to say that I was a bit nervous speaking to so many of you. At least me would be if I wasn't totally mashed.
I would like to say thank you to everyone who is wishing us congratulations for hitting 20,000 subscribers on Chalchitra Talks. Abhi kuch minute pehle hi hue, in fact. And Nikhil Chaudhary Singh, I just came here from the stream and saw Make Good Art part, and I'm pumped up. You should be, because it's amazing. Sameer Sohal is giving like love from shout out. Love to you also, Sameer. JUIT is fun. I love my college.
Normally, the only public speaking that me does is to 12 people. And it's well easy. All me has to say is my name and the words not guilty. Check it. Me agreed to speak here today because me wanted to talk to the brightest minds of our generation, to see what makes Harvard so special, and also because they agreed to pay for me flight over here in a hotel room. Sorry to bring this up now, but when you is told that your hotel bill is being paid for, you naturally assume that that includes essential extras like breakfast and special interest pay-per-view movies, innit? Imagine my surprise when this morning I was given a bill for $164. Me was actually trying to save Harvard money by buying the 24-hour Slutfest packages at $19.99. I mean, I could have paid for individual films at $11.99 each, which would have cost you Young and Tight, Backdoor Burglar 2, Backdoor Burglar 3, Campus Confessions, Asian Fever, Shaven Buffet. Saw that twice. Cold Mountain, that was a mistake. Backdoor Burglar 4, about $490. I mean, come off it. Some of it was even research for this. I assure one of the cheerleaders in Ivy League amateur.
Okay, 5 minute हो गए अभी तक कुछ आया नहीं. Comments are turned off. Dude, मैं तो comments में देखने वाला था अच्छा होता. या आगे कर रहा हूँ मैं ना.
Check out the DVD player in the back, alright? Oh, what's that? Ostrich leather. Oh. Not inappropriate, not inappropriate. That was in the balance, that one. So students, give it up for your parents. Give it up for them. Respect them. All right, enough. All right, chill out. Let's talk about the future, your future. A lot of you is probably worried about employment. Unfortunately, most of you will end up getting jobs, especially now you has got the burden of a degree. You is the elite. You'll be tomorrow's captains of industry. Sitting in front of me is probably the next Bill Gates, Donald Trump, and even Ronald McDonald.
Oh shit, Donald Trump, those are fun.
And even if you can't all be Ronald himself, most of you is probably McDonald's team leader material. By the way, if any of you ever gets to do business with Sir Ronald, a word of advice, don't mention the size of his feet. Him is well sensitive about it. My mate Dave actually met him, and him said that even though he may seem like he's always smiling, there's a sadness in their eyes.
Okay, ये बकचोद सी है, ये आप लोग देखना. Rishabh is appreciating. अरे यार, like thank you so much Rishabh. Arun K Nair ने कहा David Foster Wallace, वो तो हम देखेंगे. David Foster Wallace, This is Water. ये बहुत लोगों की आज तक की फेवरेट स्पीच है. मेरे को पहली बार देखी थी तो मेरे को समझ नहीं आई थी. I'll be very honest with you. But इसमें एक पार्ट है जो स्टार्ट करता है This is Water. मेरे को उस पे एनालिसिस वीडियो देखने पड़ते थे, तब जाके समझ आई थी.
Anybody feels like perspiring, I'd invite you to go ahead because I'm sure going to. In fact, I'm going to get a hanky right here. Greetings, thanks, and congratulations to Kenyon's graduating class of 2005. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" and the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" This is a standard requirement of U.S. commencement speeches, the deployment of didactic little parable-ish stories. The story...
ये मतलब इस पे ना दिस इज वाटर पे एक इंटरनेट से रिलेटेड भी वीडियो है जहाँ पे दिखाया है कि इज ये वाला ही होगा आई थिंक.
Greetings, thanks, and congratulations to Kenyon's graduating class of 2005. If anybody feels like perspiring, I'd invite you to go ahead because I'm sure going to. In fact, I'm going to get a hanky right here.
इसका मैं आपको मतलब बताना चाहता हूँ कि दो फिशेस हैं पानी में बात कर रही हैं एंड कि बहादुर से कोई बोलता है हे बडी व्हाट्स हाउ इज द वाटर डाउन देयर एंड वन ऑफ द फिशेस सेज टू द अदर फिश व्हाट द हेल इज वाटर. सो इट टुक मी अ लॉन्ग टाइम टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इट मेंट. एक इंटरनेट ऑब्सेशन पे इस पे एक वीडियो जो मेरे को अभी नहीं मिल रहा, बट अगेन वील मूव फर्दर. डेविड फॉस्टर वॉलेस की स्पीच देखो एंड माय फेवरेट मार्क डुप्लेस साउथ बाय साउथवेस्ट स्पीच. अरे भाई साहब, अरे 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 ये स्पीच तो गाइस जीवन बदल देगी आपका. ये तो मतलब
Starting my stopwatch now. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out this morning. I would like to start. If everyone, we could just go around the room. If you could stand up and introduce yourselves, I think it would be great. No, I'm serious, guys. I'm really serious. So we're going to talk a lot about movies today. I hope that's what you're here to talk about. We're gonna talk about the bad news and the good news of independent film. And you know, if you're at all like me and you read the trades and you're involved in film conversations, it's mostly bad news. I think that what we hear about is the death of the middle class of independent
यार ये
film.
मैं इतनी बार देख चुका हूँ गाइस कि मैं चाहता हूँ मैं इसके लिए अलग हेडस्पेस में. मैंने एक मेरे चलचित्र पे भी मार्क डुप्लेस के ऊपर एक स्ट्रीम किया था एंड वेयर आई स्पेशली टॉक्ड अबाउट दिस स्पीच. ये आप देखना, ये 1 घंटे का दिखा रहा है बट स्पीच 40 मिनट की, फिर 20 मिनट का Q&A. सो दिस इज मार्क डुप्लेस की वन ऑफ द स्पीचेस यू शुड सी. ये मतलब वही है, मेरे को अलग जोन में होना पड़ेगा इसके लिए, बट दिस इज द टॉप रिकमेंडेशन फॉर द डे. Another I'll give Jack Dorsey speech. So he's the CEO of Twitter. आपको ये वाली स्पीच देखनी चाहिए.
This is a huge crowd. Well, thank you all for having me. Thank you for your time. I'm going to
अरे
do some...
किसी ने एक मेरे को बताया है, मुकुल ने, Pursuit of Wonders, David Foster Wallace वीडियो एडिक्शन. सॉरी आई हैव टू चेक. मुकुल अगर तुमने ये बता दिया तो हम ये वीडियो देखेंगे. Pursuit of Wonder, David Foster Wallace. Oh shit, I think this is the video. This is the video.
Part of the allure of both drugs and entertainment is escape, yes, from my problems and my life and having to be stuck in here. I can, pretend I'm James Bond or pretend to. It just and it seems fine over the short haul as a way of life. It doesn't work all that well, though. No.
David Foster Wallace is regarded as one of the most unique, talented, and perceptive writers of the late 20th and early 21st century. Wallace is especially renowned for his novel, Infinite Jest, released in 1996, which shook the literature world with its style, layers, humor, and insightful examinations of modern life. One of the primary themes of the novel is the nature of entertainment and its effects on the consumer, a theme that has only become more and more relevant since the release of the novel. When discussing this theme, Wallace proposed that media and entertainment have become so easy, so pleasurable, and so vast that they are more appealing than real life, which has a high potential of leading to an unhealthy addiction. At the time, he was primarily referring to television. However, it's fair to say that his thoughts also had some root in his expectations for the future. When writing and discussing these ideas in the 90s, Wallace had enough insight to predict things like Netflix and FaceTime, which would end up becoming true to a frightening degree of accuracy. Since Wallace's time, sadly having taken his life in 2008, technology and media have continued to progress at a disorienting rate, congruent with his predictions. We have a phone in our pocket at all times that connects us to essentially anything we want, whenever we want. Cell phone service and Wi-Fi is essentially everywhere. Social medias have become pervasive. Computers and laptops are commonplace for everyone of all ages. There are too many TV networks and streaming platforms to count. The amount of content being produced, broadcasted, and uploaded into the world is unending. It's fair to say that the concerns Wallace had decades ago are now more valid and critical than ever. It is not that entertainment is bad fundamentally. In fact, Wallace never explicitly felt or claimed that it was. Instead, however, he pointed out that the problem arises when a consumer loses self-control over their consumption and seeks constant passive entertainment. He suggested that this loss of control is becoming increasingly hard to avoid because of modern entertainment's accessibility, commercialization, and addictive quality, making media and entertainment an easy yet risky drug of choice, one that we should perhaps be more careful with. Commercial entertainment's goal is to make money, and it makes money through distribution sales and/or advertising, which is dependent on viewership and viewer retention. This means entertainment has to be as accessible to as many people as possible in order to obtain viewers, and as pleasurable as possible to keep them coming back. Generally, in order for commercial entertainment to be successful in this, it has to be easy and fun. And what is easy is what requires nothing of the consumer and allows them to forget about the stresses and challenges of their life. As a result, entertainment has followed this path of least resistance, attending to the consumer's base desires for pleasure and ease. Consequently, entertainment in general has become increasingly mindless, numbing, and distracting, rather than complex, nuanced, and thought-provoking. Wallace contested, or at least questioned, the idea that the experience of life benefited much from pleasure at all. Being of a financially stable family in the United States, Wallace was afforded material comforts, higher education, and in his later years, some amount of fame and fortune. He had access to essentially as much pleasure as he wanted and obtained what some might regard as the American dream, and yet he remained deeply sad and lonely. Not only that, but he found that he was not unique in this feeling. In fact, he observed that the majority of his friends and acquaintances in similar circumstances also felt the same way, and generally, Western society...
Sorry, I'm not speaking anything क्योंकि ये वीडियो को कुछ ज़्यादा ही अच्छा लग रहा है, so ये खत्म होने के बाद बात करते हैं.
Large felt the same way. This raises the question, how is it possible that people who appear to have everything one could want according to Western ideals feel very little on the inside? Wallace considered the possibility that we often confuse what we want with what we need and vice versa, and that by always giving in to our compulsions to feel pleasure, we're actually enslaving ourselves to our base nature and inhibiting any higher level of human experience. Wallace suggested that, in part, our tendency to do so was a result of being told by culture that we are special and we should serve ourselves above everything and anyone else. We should derive as much pleasure from life, we should consume as much media and entertainment as we can, buy as much stuff as we can, ingest as much substance as we can, be as famous and as wealthy as we can. We should want only to feel good all the time and turn away from anything that requires vulnerability, deep, challenging thought, sadness, or self-honesty. The problem is that things that burden us as humans are always vibrating inside us, and when we choose to pretend they aren't there by veiling them with distractions, we actually neglect to ever truly treat them, better understand ourselves, connect with others, and improve our life. We become sort of hypnotized by technology and entertainment and find ourselves just distracted enough to be comfortable in our discomfort. What does all this mean for us? Are we hopeless to be further consumed by consumption, destined to reside in a limbo of sadness, isolation, and dissatisfaction? It depends. It is not that smartphones, social media, the internet, television, etc. are bad. They can be very useful, and being entertained has its place in life. However, the problem is that too much of anything is by nature too much, and when something feels so much better than real life and provides so much pleasure, it becomes addictive, and when it becomes addictive, we tend to indulge too much. Like a drug or alcohol, it becomes an escape that we keep returning to, only to sanction us from ever addressing or caring to address the things that we are trying to escape from. Instead of dealing with life's stresses and problems in healthy ways, thinking about them, talking about them, expressing them, and facing them, we pretend that they don't exist and turn to something that is not sustainable or fundamentally helpful as a means of solution. We turn to the mindless entertainment and media on our phones, our TVs, and our computers. It is not hopeless, though. Mass media and entertainment is a cultural phenomenon, but the consumption of it is an issue at the individual level. For many of us, we are in fact addicted, but like any form of addiction, there is hope for recovery. Admitting that one is addicted and not in control is typically the first step, and maybe that's a good place to start if we in fact are. at which point we can begin to realize how healthy or unhealthy our choices are pertaining to what we consume and how often we consume it. In Wallace's case, he actually removed television from his home in order to combat his tendency to constantly watch it. We don't necessarily have to follow suit and entirely disconnect ourselves in the same way, because there are great benefits to engaging in media and entertainment. It is not all bad and passive. There are great shows, great movies, great YouTube channels, great websites, and so on. Ones that engage the viewer in ways that help them think, learn, consider, and develop. Content that makes the consumer feel less alone or actually address things that are difficult, sad, or honest, even if they're not always very entertaining. Instead of disconnecting entirely, perhaps approaching our consumption with some amount of intention is more realistic, similar to how one might be conscious of what they eat and drink. To curb an unhealthy diet, one does not stop eating, but instead they eat healthier foods and perhaps less food. We can have our cheat days, but we should be careful and recognize the very real consequences of what media we consume and how much we consume of it. This is not to suggest that modifying and reducing our consumption is easy, but it is to suggest that perhaps it is serious and necessary if we want to be healthier, happier individuals. In life, there is value in effort, vulnerability, and selflessness. There's value in doing or watching things that make us work a little, or feel a little gloomy, or think a little bit more than we'd like. There are parts of life that aren't pleasurable, but rewarding. Parts where you don't feel special, but feel a part of a much bigger picture or community. Parts that aren't entertaining, but important. Perhaps what we can learn from Wallace is to remember this, to not always follow our desires for pleasure and ease, and instead, sometimes force ourselves to face our demons head on, to challenge ourselves, to try and connect with, understand, and improve the world around us, instead of always trying to escape it.
Fuck dude, this was good. Thank you so much मुकुल. ये तो बहुत ही शानदार वीडियो बनाया. इससे एक और सही चीज हो गई, मेरे को शायद याद आ गया, मैं आप लोगों को कौन सा डेविड फॉस्टर वॉलेस का वीडियो दिखाना चाहता था. डेविड फॉस्टर वॉलेस डोपामीन एडिक्शन पे है वो. नहीं यार, ब्लैंक ऑन ब्लैंक तो नहीं है यार. मम्मा मिल क्यों नहीं रहा? Is it this? Oh yes. Is it? Let me just confirm. I'm not.
That's not a bad photo. Laura posted a new album. A new video from John Oliver. Look at all these other videos. A new follower on Twitter. A few hot takes from the debate last night. This guy has a Wikipedia page. Oh, he grew up near New York. I grew up near New York. Just catch up on Instagram. Text from mom. Text from dad. Hey, dad, watch this kid shoot a firework at his dad. Send. Holy shit. It's been 40 minutes. Every time I look up after being stuck in my phone like this, I...
ये वाला वीडियो भी नहीं है. मैंने पता है एक दिन मेरे घर पे पूरा ग्रुप लाइक हमारी जॉइंट फैमिली का दिवाली के टाइम पे शायद डिनर था. मेरी जितनी भी कजन सिस्टर्स हैं मैं उन सबको लाया कि मतलब सबको रूम में बैठा और मैंने कहा अपन ये वीडियो देखते हैं. Dopamine addiction, but this is not the one. I'm उसको ऐसे start नहीं होता.
Information consumes our attention.
उसमें म्यूजिक भी नहीं चल रहा. तो बहुत ही से academic video. I'm so sorry यार, मेरे को वो ढूंढना पड़ेगा. Dopamine addiction, internet. The signs of internet addiction. Let's see this. Your phone is a dopamine pump. ऐसा सही कोई वीडियो है? Dopamine fasting. एक सेकंड ना. ऐसा सही कोई वीडियो है वो. But now I have to.
In September of 1848, a 25-year-old named Phineas Gage was working on a railroad in Vermont when some explosive powder ignited prematurely and sent an iron rod flying through his cheek and out the top of his skull, demolishing his prefrontal cortex. The rod was later found about 30 yards from the explosion, smeared with blood and brain. Remarkably, he was able to get back to his life after only 2 months after the accident, reporting that he felt better in every respect with no lingering pain. His personality, however, was not the same. The physician that attended to him said, "The balance between his intellectual faculties and animal propensities seems to have been destroyed." Before the accident, he was described as having an iron frame and iron will. But the damage to Gage's prefrontal cortex resulted in a total loss of social inhibitions and self-control. Virtually anybody without brain damage would have better self-control than Phineas Gage, but most of us are not always 100% in control of ourselves. If we were, life would be significantly easier. Going on a diet, all you need to do is make the decision to no longer want or like cheesecake. And come tax season, just dial up your excitement to make a due diligence checklist. Most of the time, we wish our prefrontal cortex would call the shots. The prefrontal cortex's job is essentially to bias the brain towards doing the harder thing. It's your prefrontal cortex that pushes you out of your warm bed to go to the gym. One of the reasons things like this aren't always that easy is that your brain's reward circuit tries to get you to do what it has to.
I'm not 100% sure if it is this video, but this is pretty fucking awesome और ये exact उस zone का है क्योंकि the video I wanted to recommend to you guys उसमें भी prefrontal cortex की बात हुई थी.
Decided is excellent for survival or reproduction. The general message from the reward circuit is do what feels good. So while your prefrontal cortex may be trying to keep you on the diet you committed to, the reward circuit brings up the strong argument of, yeah, but pizza tastes good right now. So in a continuum with willpower on the left and impulsiveness on the right, Phineas Gage would be on the far right. And on the left you'd have people like disciplined athletes, accomplished writers, or well-trained musicians. Then it's safe to say that those with a drug addiction would be quite far to the right. This is because one of the effects of addiction is that it simultaneously gives more power to the reward system and decreases functionality in the prefrontal cortex, undermining willpower and enhancing impulsive behavior. That is, long-term goals begin to suffer at the expense of instant gratification. Anything that isn't quickly rewarding takes some level of motivation, willpower, or focus. For example, you need to be a little bit more to the left on this continuum to read a book than watch a TV show. And you'd have to be even farther to the left to start practicing the piano. So the question of this video is, can certain aspects of the internet lower prefrontal cortex function and enhance the reward system just enough to make you less able to do certain challenging things? Narcotics are so strongly addictive that the negative effects are obvious. But what about things that are less addictive and cause more subtle changes? For example, it might be hard to realize that where you could sit still and read a book for 2 hours before, now you get fidgety and bored after only 45 minutes. Or you could slowly have more and more of those days where you feel like you're too tired to do personal projects after getting home from work. But why? Well, the key neurochemical behind addiction is dopamine. As all addictive
I think this is the video. Wait कर अंदर dopamine का होगा.
drugs cause a massive rise in dopamine. And as we'll talk about later, certain ways of using the internet can cause a particularly strong release of dopamine. You've probably heard about dopamine as it's a key player in the reward circuit. What isn't explained too often is the fact that dopamine isn't mainly for pleasure or liking, it's responsible for wanting, and the two don't always go hand in hand.
Yes. So fuck. So I need to say this. मेरे को शायद ये वीडियो है या नहीं, but like जो मेरे को पता चला था, like the video of this family when I saw this. हम basically जब हमारे किसी उस पे like आते हैं, like when we are like when someone likes a photo, तो dopamine release तब नहीं होता है, but dopamine release तब होता है in the anticipation of the like. So ये मेरे को best example तब लगा था कि जैसे मैं इंस्टा पे कोई फोटो डालता हूँ, मेरे का डोपामिन रिलीज तब नहीं होगा जब मेरे उस पर 100 लाइक है. मेरा डोपामिन रिलीज तब होगा कि जब मैंने वो फोटो डाल दी, उससे लेके लाइक्स जब आने का जो टाइम है, वहां डोपामिन रिलीज होता है.
In 1989, Kent Berridge and his colleagues did an experiment to test the hypothesis that dopamine demonstrates wanting and therefore liking. A chemical compound was used to destroy dopamine neurons in rats' brains, and this destroyed the rats' capacity for motivation, or wanting. The rats had no interest in food even if it was right in front of them, to the point that if the researchers didn't feed the rats through a tube, they would starve to death. Like humans, rodents actually make facial expressions, which researchers can monitor to understand whether a rat enjoyed the taste of something. They found that chemically destroying the dopamine neurons in the brain destroyed all motivation, but Berridge and his team were surprised to find that rats showed all the signs of liking when they got a sugar solution, even after depletion of nearly all brain dopamine. The conclusion was that the dopamine system controls wanting, but not liking. In certain situations, however, dopamine is released in response to receiving a reward. However, the purpose of this dopamine is not to make you feel good, but to learn how to get that reward again. Dopamine is released in response to receiving unexpected rewards. When an unexpected reward comes along, the brain says, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Hold up. What did we do to get that reward and how can we get it again? In a 1993 experiment in Switzerland, monkeys were put in a situation where if they pressed the right lever after a light came on, they got rewarded with some apple juice. At first, dopamine went up when they got the juice. After they got the hang of the task, however, dopamine began to rise when the light came on. What was happening was that the monkey's brain took note of everything that happened before getting the juice. The monkey understood that the light indicated that it could press a lever to get a reward, and dopamine was linked to the light, the cue for the reward. In this way, dopamine is important for learning and motivation. Dopamine keeps track of what behaviors done in what situations will get you rewards, and then motivates you to do those behaviors. And if you block the dopamine rise, you won't get the behavior, even if the cue is present.
Today, dopamine is not about pleasure, it's about the anticipation of pleasure.
This is the video, guys. Let me write this. Sorry. Dopamine is not about the pleasure. It is about the anticipation of pleasure. Dude. I'm so happy we found this video. ये सब बंद करो, हम वो video देखते हैं. I'm so happy.
It's about the pursuit of happiness rather than happiness itself. It's not just about the anticipation, it's about the work you were willing to do to get it, the goal-directed behavior.
This way of the brain initiating learning when getting an unexpected reward was very useful for, say, remembering how to get back to a water source or a berry bush you stumbled across by accident. This also explains why cues like seeing a bar where they drink alcohol before can trigger strong dopamine rises and therefore strong cravings in addicts. While the prefrontal cortex's job is to get you to do the hard thing, the main job of the brain's reward circuit is to get you to do the thing that produces the most dopamine. Neurotransmitters, like dopamine, work by binding to a certain receptor which will produce an effect or feeling. Drugs work by causing an artificially strong activation of these receptors. For example, the feeling of runner's high comes from the natural neurotransmitter endorphin activating your opioid receptors. The drug heroin works by very strongly activating these same opioid receptors. People who have experienced runner's high and have used heroin will report that while the effect of heroin is of course much stronger, the experiences are somewhat similar. Our bodies are constantly trying to remain in a state of balance. This is called homeostasis. Things like your blood sugar levels, pH level, your temperature, and blood pressure are all finely regulated. Stimulation is also something your body tries to regulate. For example, heroin users constantly activate opioid receptors to get a euphoric body high. To maintain balance and regulate stimulation, the brain downregulates or decreases the number of opioid receptors available, and the user gets less and less of a high. One particular receptor frequently found to be downregulated as a consequence of addiction is the dopamine receptor. Less receptors available means less dopamine signaling, and it becomes.
So ये video आप लोग पूरा देखना. I'm just very glad that I found this. इसके अलावा coming back to commencement speeches, ये mix हो गया, तो मैं आप लोगों को जैक डॉर्सी की एक speech दिखा रहा था. Jack Dorsey is the CEO of Twitter, and इसने Viacom की startup school में speech दी थी. My elder brother recommended this to me.
A little bit different, something I've never really done before. Which is simply read to you from some books that have helped me along the way, helped me along a transition, helped me get started, but also helped me through many things. And there's so many lessons in these books, and please, if you get a chance, buy them yourselves and read through the entire things. But I'm going to give you some highlights and some of my experience with the passages. The first book is a book called The Art Spirit by Robert Henry, who was a painter, and I know there's a lot of affinity for painters in these parts. This is about creativity through the lens of an art student. And I'm going to read it through my phone because I could not find a bookstore that would sell me a paperback version of this today. So we're going to bring up iBooks. It starts off.
तो ये ऐसे इसमें 5 से 6 किताबें recommend करेगा, and they are like really good. So आप ये जैक डॉर्सी की भी ये वाली स्पीच देखो, it's very good. So हमारी क्या recommendations हो गई. The Neil Gaiman recommendation, the Jack Dorsey one, and एक और था, नील गेमन हो गया, जैक डॉर्सी हो गया, नॉट द साचा बोइन वन, वो मतलब वो तो आई जस्ट ओपनड इट बिकॉज यू गाइस सजेस्टेड, but Neil Game, Mark Duplass, obviously you should definitely go for the Mark Duplass one, and you should and the David Foster Wallace one. तो ये 4 हैं. उसके अलावा जो हमने इंटरनेट एडिक्शंस पे वीडियोस देखे, you guys should watch them. They are really really good, and especially this video, मैं इसका लिंक ट्राई करूंगा, मैं बाद में डाल भी दूं, जो हमने देखा था. वापस मत घूमे यार, हाँ ये रहा, द साइंस ऑफ इंटरनेट एडिक्शन एंड पावर. सो sorry, मैंने स्क्रीन शेयर नहीं की थी. So the science of internet addiction and power, you should watch. So yes, this was it, man. I'll be back to my home tomorrow, and like we'll be doing the streams again from the same place. But yeah, this was fun. I did not want to break the streak. Streak तो ऐसे break कर दी थी मैंने, बीच बीच में हो जाती है. But I was feeling good because we also crossed 20,000 subscribers on Chalchitra Talks today. एंड हमारे आजकल वीडियोस पहले से थोड़े ज्यादा चल रहे हैं, तो अच्छा लगता है. एंड डू ऑल्सो सब्सक्राइब टू दिस चैनल गाइज, बिकॉज you guys can see I'm trying to do something very different here, and something which is much larger than movies, like discovering things with you, recommending it to each other, and doing all those things together and making notes वगैरह. तो इससे आपको भी मजा आएगा, मेरे को भी मजा आता है, एंड ये रोज रात को हम कर सकते हैं. सो ये चैनल सब्सक्राइब कर लो, एंड इट वुड रियली हेल्प अस. अभी अराउंड 480 सब्सक्राइबर्स है, बट इफ यू वुड लाइक सब्सक्राइब, तो मतलब एटलीस्ट 1000 तो कर लेते हैं. 1000 से थोड़ा मतलब रिस्पेक्टेबल नंबर होता है. बट yes, do subscribe to this channel if you haven't, and thank you so much, Omi Rockin, for your wishes. Thank you to everyone for all the love on Chalchitra. It feels really really good, क्योंकि अच्छा है, मतलब पिछले कुछ टाइम से तो अभी हमारे impressions भी आए हैं चैनल पे, and since we started uploading one video every day, it has done us good. And I don't know if you guys know, but we have almost a 50-day streak on Chalchitra Talk now. पिछले 50 दिन से रोज का एक वीडियो आ रहा है चैनल पे, एंड it just feels good कि हम सब लगे हुए हैं. मतलब कुछ भी होता है, कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ जाती है, कोई नहीं डाल पाया, और सोचा कोविड में सब इतनी मेहनत कर रहे हैं, लाइक मोस्ट ऑफ द कंट्रीब्यूटर्स जो भी क्रिएटर्स हैं, सबके अलग अलग जॉब्स भी हैं, but we try never to miss a day. And yes, and उसका भी हमें payback मिल रहा है. So वो ये कि thank you so much guys, it feels good. चलो, I'll leave now.